So, hello and welcome to lecture 12. You almost survived the semester, especially since next week is just going to be a wrap-up of the lecture. Tried to prepare yet another new lecture, but time constraints permitted that, unfortunately. So we have something, but it's not worth presenting. It doesn't meet our quality standards. So next week, just wrap up. And 2/3 of a lecture less for you to remember for the exam. But we'll add it next semester. So if you are very motivated to come back to the course, please do so. What are we going to do today? We're going to continue a little bit down the road that we touched on last week. So we started with the eco-efficiency and essentially made our way to eco-sufficiency. We'll go through some of the definitions again in a second. And then went down a little rabbit hole to look at one particular issue that might arise when we say, okay, instead of trying to maximize our consumption and consume as many products, services, or whatever as possible, what if we, for the sake of sustainability and our own mental health, think about a concept where stuff is enough, so sufficiency. And one of the major questions that often pops up then is, okay, what do people do all day, and what everyone will be out of job if we don't buy a new iPhone every week or every year, and a new TV and everything, like fast fashion, blah, blah, blah. Like, what are people gonna do? How do we keep them busy? And essentially, what Graeber tried to do, or to argue in a very, 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 very long way of a researcher is, yeah, we don't have to work 40, 60, 80 hours a week. There's also a way to go for less, especially, and that was one of the key points of his book, if a lot of tasks don't really need to be there in the first place. So why do we keep ourselves busy? And in the end, he proposed, in order to avoid that dilemma, this universal basic income as one potential solution. And so today we're going to essentially continue there. Of course, just saying we do universal basic income is not going to solve climate change or our resource scarcity or environmental pollution, but it could be one of the building blocks of a different system. So, therefore, first short recap, and then we go to universal basic income, which includes also a short task for you. It's very unfortunate that we have 7 people now. No, wait, we have Marcel online, so we can divide it into 2 groups. And then we're almost done. Good, so eco-sufficiency, we had various definitions. Seeking enough when more is possible is both intuitive and rational, personally, organizationally, and ecologically. And under global ecological constraints, it's ethical. That was the definition by Prince, the IPCC, that we often use as a reference for definitions, defines it as a set of policy measures and daily practices that avoid the demand for energy, materials, land, water, and other natural resources, while providing well-being for all within planetary boundaries. Long story short, sufficiency is all you need is less. That's the short handle that you can remember. From there on, we went to Keynes, who predicted the 15-hour work week about 100 years ago. We didn't really get that. I guess everyone working in my group can attest to that 15 minutes is not going to cut it. You personally, from your study experience, probably can also tell so. So something in that prediction went wrong. Then we talked about this phenomena of jobs existing without seeming to contribute to society, and Graeber's critique on all of that, and this is then how we ended up with this universal basic income as one countermeasure to say, okay, look, if everyone is fed and has a roof over their head, and there is still meaningful work left to do, then we can do it. Otherwise, what's the point of doing meaningless tasks just to get pretty much the same? And that begs the question, what is a universal basic income? Just quick hand raises, who has heard of this term and has a rough idea? So either universal basic income or in German, universelles Grundeinkommen. 1, 2, 2.5, 2/3, okay. I don't want to ask too many questions because then your answer's on video, but we'll get to that part in a second, because I would also be quite interested in your, just like from what you have now, your perceptions, but I think we can nicely integrate that into the task that comes in a second, or in a few minutes. Good, so universal basic income, short UBI. There are various synonyms that either mean exactly the same or something related. Basic income guarantee or unconditional basic income. There are a few more there. Currently, to the best of my knowledge, as of now, not a single country has implemented a UBI. There are, of course, various social welfare programs that exist in various countries. For example, Germany, if you're getting unemployed, you get unemployment money. If you lose, for whatever reason, you can't pay rent, at least there are options to not end up on the street. I don't say that they are like easily available and often work as they should, but like you get a pension, you get unemployment money. There are like various means from the government to help you in certain situations. What is provided in terms of utility or benefits for you will have overlaps with the universal basic income, but there are also key differences. So that's why I'm like saying it's not implemented anywhere in the meaning or in the sense of universal basic income. There are various small-scale pilots, and not just now, like they've done the first pilots decades ago in various parts of the world, but it never became a permanent fixture. Like it was a test, geographic locations, certain social classes or whatever, like various parameters that have been tested in different places, but thus far it didn't really become a thing. So welcome back. We just had a very nice discussion on the pros, cons, challenges, and also the implications of various challenges. And now we will tackle one of the challenges that are most common, and that is pretty much the funding question. So we're already people in the audience figuring that out roughly. So if we have 84 million Germans roughly, maybe you can also turn it down to 80, assume 1,200 euros, and then you get something like €1 trillion per year that need to be paid, that have to come from somewhere. There are, of course, various number games now that you can play. You can check how much money does the German government spend now, and how much of this would be left as free cash flow if you use something like universal basic income, and thereby eliminate the need, for example, for unemployment payments, for retirement payments, and so on and so on, and see like how much money is left there. So this is from 2023, 2022, if I'm not mistaken. It's not from 2024. This is just the percentage-wise distribution of how much goes into which federal institute, in which Bundesministerium, and work and social stuff has by far the largest share, and others like getting more fringe and fringe and fringe. So obviously, if you have something like universal basic income that you can consider a relevant part of work and social security stuff, that would probably balloon now. But this is just percentage-wise. We'll go into more like actual numbers now. So one of the first ideas to get that money is to tax people. You already like assumed that already in the discussions that we made, that the money could come from taxes. But what type of taxes? Of course, you could raise the taxes that people now make on their income, but if you use that money anyway to pay them in income, that might not be the smartest thing. You could introduce income-dependent taxes, saying, okay, everything below $5,000 per month is free, and just the people above pays a certain amount of taxes. You can, of course, also tax the richest more. There were times in the US, I think like the tax rate for the super rich was something like 75%, if I'm not mistaken. Please look it up before replicating the knowledge, but it was extremely high. So the more you earned, the more went to the government. But if you're making more than $1 million, is it really bad that from the first euro after $1 million, you're only getting 25 cents instead of 75 cents? Like, does it really make a dent in your living quality, or would you not mind? Or if we give everyone who has reached $1 billion of net worth, we give them a badge, and now for everything that they earn on top is 100% taxed. There are like different ways to think about this from an income tax perspective. I think we'll also get to that in a second. One alternative and quite targeted approach, which would also usually rather impact the rich people, would be something like a financial transaction tax, where every transaction that is made, for example, on the stock market is taxed, because right now you're paying a fee to the broker who gives you the stocks, for example, but you're not paying a fee. And who's mostly invested in the stock market are people with free income, usually not all students who might have a tight budget, and also not everyone who works full-time has the means to also put money in the stock market, but it's rather like people who are comfortable and have gambling money left that they hope to multiply, but they're also not going to die if it's all gone. So therefore, like this financial transaction tax being already targeted at people with spare money. So every time you buy a stock, you buy Bitcoin, you buy an ETF, debts of a country, you pay a fraction of a cent in terms of transaction fee. It prevents financial market speculation from being more profitable than investments in the real economy as a side effect. So you're not only targeting the people who have money, but also stuff like investing in Bitcoin or something else, rather than repairing a fridge, becomes less attractive if you have to pay the transaction fee. It will also probably lead to a little bit more economic stability because you have less gambling. Only professional finance gamblers lose money, probably not the poor people who don't have taxes, have stocks in the first place. So it's a rather targeted approach, and you can probably already imagine that this is not very popular among the people who would not benefit from the system, but run more or less most of the economy. Another idea could be a so-called negative income tax, where you have individual earnings below a certain threshold receive supplemental pay from the government instead of paying taxes. So you have a job, you only earn $800, okay, so up to $1,000 is compensated by the government. If you earn more, then you start paying taxes again. So you have something like shifting tax inputs from one party to another. So everyone who's below that threshold just receives money, everyone above pays. And thereby you're trying to get some kind of equilibrium. You can also think about taxing consumption more heavily, financed by what we have already in German Mehrwertsteuer, or in English value-added tax, which replaces all other taxes and social security contributions. So you're essentially really just taxing consumptions, and thereby but throwing everything else out. So you're essentially really taxing just what people consume, but obviously on a higher rate than we do right now. You can also think about adding a taxation of natural resource consumption. So there was, it's also already quite super old idea, the Tobin tax, that is paid on top of the taxes that you have right now, and essentially punishes natural resource depletion and environmental damages. So when you have a product, you have an organization, a committee, whatever, via an LCA determining what types of resources are you using, are critical resources, how much do they hurt the environment, how rare are they, blah, 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 blah. Essentially trying to come up with a consolidated number that says how bad this product is for society or for the environment. And the worse your product is, the higher the tax for people who still want to consume your service, your product. So private planes would probably private plane trips by celebrities and rich people would probably look rather bad in this example when you have a Tobin tax on taking your single-person airplane to go from New York to London just to drink a coffee. This has been proposed before. Of course, it's not really popular because it would make stuff way more complicated and ruins profits, but it would be an idea to regulate and also incentivize the, in quotation mark, right behavior of consumption. And there are many, many more of those like targeted ideas where you either try to shift money from one point to another or tie it to the consumption, tie it to the environmental damage, the resource consumption, also to special groups or categories of employers. So like there's a lot of stuff, as I said, you can do a whole lecture on each of them. I'm just scratching the surface here a little bit. There are also universal basic income initiatives who argue in favor of trying this out on a large scale. And in order to already like make this a concept that is known, that people can touch, and that can be used to gather further data, there are various groups now that collect money in terms of donations and then use it to hand out universal basic incomes to people who win in some kind of a raffle, so lottery, for 12 months or for a lifetime, depending on the constellation here. And I think here it's $1,000 for 12 months if you win one of those UBIs. You can go to that website right now and register because I think every month they have a lottery like this. So if you want to take a chance and see what it's like to have a universal basic income for 12 months, this is the website to go. So they are essentially advocating for it, providing the test bed to give it a shot, but also raising awareness and making people experience what it would like. And if you go to, what it be like to have a UBI? And you can also go to this website or to similar websites and read various experiences and user stories or user experiences on what it's like to suddenly have that. So you're studying Digitech today, and tomorrow you get the notification that for the next 12 months you get $1,000 on top. How did that change your life? Did you really do more work for society, or do you just go on a drug binge for the next 12 months and then go back to studying? Are you just going to play computer games all times? Like, how is this going to impact your life? And this is probably one of the best touch points to really have an opinion on that once you can, like once you tried it. And this is a little bit like one of the motivations of such organizations here. We're missing, Nelly, we're missing one slide. And now she's gone. There was one slide about, okay, we'll put that slide back in the slide set, I promise. But essentially there is one slide that was, or two slides maybe, that are now missing. Maybe we lost them in the update earlier today, where we had listed out, okay, how much money does the government make in terms of taxes already? How much does it accumulate? And if you're now like subtracting everything that would go away, if you have a universal basic income, adding stuff in terms of expenses on top, like long story short, there wouldn't be such a big gap to bridge given the finances that the government has right now. Maybe one of you who has a computer nearby could maybe check what the annual tax income for the government is in 2024 or 2023, just to give a rough number. But the gap wasn't so absurdly big as you might imagine, but still it was underfunded. So there would, like in some kind of way, you either need to work on this tax thing, either adjusting tax rates for certain things or introducing new taxes, or you have to find a way to make that number smaller. So instead of the $1,200 that we used here as an example, $1,000, $500, but then of course you still have to make sure that it meets the purpose. Or if you move away from the explicit like cash thing, so that you get $1,000 in cash, but no health insurance and everything else, that gives you different numbers. But we'll get back to that. Sorry about that, 2 slides or 1 slide missing. Good. What's the main takeaway that we wanted to convey to you with this short intro to universal basic income? So first of all, what is universal basic income? The slightly different approaches towards it. So if you think back to the 3-dimensional cube, what kind of subcategories for universal basic income can be perceived or can be experienced if you have conditional or slightly more conditional or even an unconditional one. Also for the types of, is it a voucher, is it cash payment, is it something else, so that you understand, okay, there are different types. If you talk about UBI, it's not just good or bad from one perspective because there is only one. Usually it's a more complicated discussion because it depends on how you structure it. But there's, of course, also a vast set of cons and pros or challenges connected to this concept. Being it funding on one hand, being it unclear changes in society with respect to motivation to work, or the estimation what types of work would change in a certain way or might disappear completely, which of them would be valued more. Like, that's very hard to predict, and this is why those test runs, either by scientists or organizations, are quite valuable, because it helps you to at least get an idea of what happens. Also currently not implemented in any country, so therefore we're lacking some like good data on this. But the small-scale pilots help, of course, to get a rough gist of what's happening there. So, not saying UBI is going to save the planet. I'm not going to say it's going to solve climate change, environmental pollution, resource scarcity, but it could be, in this line of thought that we followed throughout these last 2 lectures, be a building block, or maybe not. Maybe someone else comes up with a better idea. If you are interested in more content regarding the 2 lectures that we are now closing, Nico Pech and Volkers wrote a book, All You Need Is Less. 1 part Buddhism, if I'm not mistaken, 1 part sufficiency. They're bringing it both together. For those of you who are interested, I was more interested in the Pech part because he's a lot of thoughts in the sufficiency direction and also how different economic systems could look like in the future. These 2 next books from Felber regarding economy for the common good, or Gemeinwohlökonomie in German, is something that is quite interesting and that we're definitely going to add to this lecture series in the future, because we actually have a professor at our university who's doing research in that direction. We just did not manage to get him in front of you. And then some further links like Bregmann's book about visions for the future. Nice read before going to bed. And then the Mein Grundeinkommen website that I showed you as a screenshot earlier to get a little bit more insight. Of course, not necessary for the exam, but if you like this idea, if you would like to learn more and go more into detail, those are some sources to start. And now we're done. I will stop the recording and we'll be back in 5 minutes for the second last Q&A session. See you in a second.